I do want to talk about another thing that people were losing their shit about on Twitter over the weekend, which I mentioned current affairs a minute ago. So there was so there's an interview in current affairs. The video is the video was like on their Patreon, but they did they published a transcript of it on the website. And as the Twitter sleuths started to look through some of what Chomsky said in this interview, they got increasingly mad about it. And there was a point I remember on Saturday afternoon when since I don't know how to live, I was on Twitter for some stupid reason, and I saw trended Noam Chomsky 12,000 whatever tweets it was already. I was like, what's going on here? And and then it turned out that what was going on is that in the interview, Noam Chomsky, shockingly enough, who like if you've been living living in a cave and are not familiar with this, right? I mean, the reason why people who aren't linguists or cognitive scientists know who this guy is, even though he certainly revolutionized those fields. But like the reason that everybody else knows who he is because he has been continuously politically active since the 1960s, and before that in some ways, but really from there in a big public way. Originally opposing the Vietnam War, and then going into opposing U.S. involvement in Latin America, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is kind of his beat, and so very unshockingly from my perspective, Noam Chomsky's perspective on a really bloody and destructive war that's going on, in which many people are dying, and in which it's the worst case scenario for how it could end is the end of all of human civilization. I mean, that's literally it. Because we're talking about the escalation of tensions between the two world's two major nuclear powers. And so even if you think there's like a 0.5% chance of that happening, that's not a nothing, right? I would prefer for human civilization to persist. If somebody told me there's 0.5% chance I'd win a multi-million-dollar jackpot, I'd be pretty excited about that. So put that in perspective. But Chomsky's perspective is that war is really bad, and that it would be better to have some sort of push for negotiated peace to stop the fighting. I mean, that's we could go into more details, but that's kind of the gist of his comments that people got upset about. And I just want to, before we talk about this, I just want to see a little sample of what and remember when I tell you there are like thousands of tweets like these. We've just we've just sort of extracted, or Andy has some nice representative examples.
I spent the past couple of days looking for these.
All right. Cheney's was
This one's directed at you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's right. So we'll see why it's directed at me in a minute. But Cheney's 1% doctrine is no better coming from Chomsky. I don't really know what that means. Biden in the U.S. will never undermine UA. He's not Trump. UA negotiated. Putin blew up talks and bombed evac corridors. UA is realistic about Putin's mismatched aims and capacity. All right, let's keep going. All right, Noam Chomsky has a long and distinguished track record of being wrong. Next, geopolitics according to Chomsky, and if you're listening to this later on the podcast, the first plate is covered with American flags, and there are bombs coming down from it. It says imperialism. And the second plate is covered with Russian flag. There are bombs coming down from it. It says anti-imperialism. I will note, by the way, if you actually read the interview, that Chomsky repeatedly says that the invasion was an act of aggression and a war crime, but whatever. Romanian liberal says people talking about what Chomsky said are really missing out on what this lunatic has to say. And he quote tweets Nathan saying there's no such thing as winning World War III. I guess that makes you a lunatic. Next. Chomsky, nothing suspicious about the JFK era assassination or 9/11. You lost credibility a long time ago. Okay, that one's fun because they're taking advantage of people being pissed off at Chomsky for not for wanting to have negotiated de-escalation in Eastern Europe. But
Ben,
no,
sorry, go ahead.
They're taking advantage of that in order to shoehorn in they're being mad at him that they don't agree. He doesn't agree with their favorite conspiracy theories that it's like he sucks. He sucks because he doesn't want to bomb Russia. Also, Noam, let's talk about the grassy knoll and why we're at Building 7.
9/11 was an inside job.
Yeah, that's top tier posting when you drag someone into some debate they don't even want to. No, this one I just wanted to point out real quick. Only Chomsky would urge negotiations with a maniac literally committing genocide right now. And then the snitch tag of Glenn Greenwald is what I love. Like you see what's going on here, Glenn?
Yeah. Let's see. So this is an adaptation of the Yet You Participate in Society Curious meme, where the peasant is saying, Russia bombed my home, murdered my entire family, and raped my daughters. And Chomsky is saying, have you considered the situation in Palestine? I'm a linguistics professor. And the main tweet above that image says, why am I not surprised that Noam Chomsky, of all people, is defending the Russian invasion of Ukraine? Next. Oh, our friend Noah Smith, who you may recall from previous hits, like referring to yours truly as Red Brown, says this man is a columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. Says Noam Chomsky is very eager to surrender on behalf of a country he'll never have to set foot in. Joe at Joe Poston says Chomsky doing the same thing neocons do, where he thinks the U.S. gets to decide how and when this war ends. This actually is my favorite talking point, but the Ukrainians get to decide how this war ends because when everyone goes home and the world stops paying attention, they'll have to live with the aftermath. Chomsky wants Ukraine to submit to the will of authoritarianism, but ultimately it's the Ukrainian people who have to live with the consequences. They've chosen to fight, and we must help them however we can. And there's and as Chomsky said, just give up already. And a Ukrainian soldier saying, no. This one is a blue check. Bruno something says, in the face of war genocide, people like Chomsky shout that the job should be finished quickly. How can an intellectual sink so low? So this person thinks that peace negotiations mean that you support genocide and want it to, and your only complaint about it is that's not happening quickly enough. Chomsky is just astonishingly ignorant about the world. Chomsky is Elon Musk for leftists. I don't quite know what that means, but okay.
I don't know. I love it. It's like it's just perfect.
I'm going to say it since folks have been saying about a woman 5 years younger than him. That'd be Dianne Feinstein. Chomsky's brain is deteriorated, probably has been for a while, and he should retire from public life. Stat. Okay, so I've actually read this interview, and he does not, in fact, say that he supports the Russian invasion of Ukraine. He doesn't say that they should just hurry up and kill Ukrainians faster. He does not say that Ukraine should just surrender to Russia. He doesn't say anything of the kind. In fact, he says a few times he said he has positive things to say about Zelensky's personal courage. He says. Actually, he doesn't say in this interview, but he said in a different one that Zelensky's statement on March 7th responded to Putin was judicious and reasonable. He has again, he repeatedly refers to the Russian invasion of Ukraine as a war crime and a war of aggression. But he does want peace negotiations because realistically, either there's going to be a lot more war for a lot longer, or there's not going to be war for very much longer because we're all just going to, vaporize, or there's some sort of negotiated settlement. And in fact, while of course it's not, Chomsky or anybody else, I mean, there's also a response to this, I've got to say, I find slightly irritated. That's like, oh, well, say exactly what you think should happen in these negotiations, exactly what the settlement is. It's like, no, that's not really how negotiations work, right? That the whole point is to get people at the table talking and then they kind of hammer out those details there. Although he did sort of speculate a little bit about what a peace deal might look like. He said that sort of have official Ukrainian neutrality, and for not joining NATO as a commitment, which I don't think joining NATO was going to happen anyway for a variety of reasons. I think it was actually not serving the Ukrainians very well to pretend that it was. And it says just kind of recognize that that recovering the Crimea isn't going to happen, right? That's been part of Russia since 2014, and then he sort of speculates on the possibility of some sort of accommodation, perhaps within a federation structure in the Donbass. And whatever you think about all of this, like how you're getting from this to like he loves Putin and he loves genocide and he wants Ukrainians to die or he wants Ukrainians to surrender is just kind of beyond me. And it's so I wrote an article about this for the Daily Beast. It went up today. That Noam Chomsky is right. The U.S. should work to negotiate an end to the war in Ukraine. And I go into a lot of this sort of specific talking points here, like the idea, people who are like bringing up the Palestine analogy, even though like Noam Chomsky is a longstanding supporter of a two-state solution in Israel-Palestine, which would be a way bigger diminution of Palestinian national aspirations than any sort of deal that he's talking about would be of Ukrainian ones, right? That a two-state solution deal, the vast majority of historical Palestine would be part of Israel, right? Whereas, under the sort of thing he's talking about, the vast majority of, post 2014 Ukraine, would continue, to be Ukraine, maybe everything that was, since the, Russian, breakaways happened. And then, I think the thing that especially gets me about this is just this idea that it's fine for the United States to flood a conflict zone with weapons to try to ensure that our favorite side wins. It's fine for us to impose like world economy shaking sanctions, but it would be too high-handed and meddling and paternalistic if we like promoted peace negotiations. It's like, yeah, no, we should completely stay out of it, except spending billions of dollars on weapons for our favorite side, and try to destroy the economy of the disfavored side. Other than that, we should stay out of it. If we try to like urge the parties to talk, right? In other words, do what the United States has done in many different situations around the world for decades, right? Camp David Accords, Good Friday Agreement, in Northern Ireland, right? Like forget the fact, by the way, while we're at it, that Zelensky himself has made several comments along that suggest that he would be happier if the United States was more interested in like being directly part of negotiations. But like, even if that wasn't true, the idea that like that's where you draw the line. No, that's too much meddling in this conflict. When you promote peace negotiations, just makes very little sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the higher the stakes, the more emotional the reasoning is, right? And it's very hard to find anyone. I mean, there's like precious few people talking about this that are actually talking about the trade-offs that need to be made. And I think it's just one of those situations where like every result is pretty bad, right? And that seems to like break people's brain. And that there's not like it's easy, if Zelensky is an Avenger and he wins, it's like that's something you could root for. But we're just choosing between two pretty bad and sad options. And I think that just it's not really fun to argue between those two. You know what I mean? And I think when they personalize it, like, oh, Chomsky never has to set foot like in Ukraine. Like, you see what this guy looks like? Do you think he's really worried, thinking about himself? Like, well, I never have to go to Ukraine personally, so that's why I can pontificate. It's like he's not thinking about, he's not still talking about this shit because of like some kind of weird like personal agenda. This is just what he thinks, and he's and he has like, I think he deserves more respect than most public intellectuals do for like a lifetime of service. You know what I mean? So these weird personal attacks against him, I think of all people against Chomsky, shows just like the absurdity of trying to personalize it,
Also, does Noah Smith have to set foot in Ukraine?
He does.
Like,
Yeah, he actually
By law.
He has a kid there, and he legally has to go.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, I'm slandering him on making shit up.
Has to visit all of his Ukrainian children.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it just seems like, well, okay, wait a second. So if you don't set foot in Ukraine, that's totally fine to advocate for like billions of dollars of like weapons transfers to Ukraine. It's totally fine to advocate for, like ratcheting up, tensions with Russia, but like, but it's where you draw the line is like peace negotiations.
Yeah, Sean Penn went to Ukraine to shoot a documentary, so I think we should we should take his word over Chomsky.
Jury's out on whether somebody made Sean Penn do that. Like he might not have had to set foot in Ukraine, but
he might have been running from somebody like the law because he beat somebody up that he shouldn't have.
More slander.
But I will say this: I would much rather see a negotiated settlement as opposed to dragging this on for years and years, which seems to be what the plan is. And let's not forget what happened the last time we did this, where we kept funneling in weapons to extend a war with the Soviet Union, I think was the name of the country at the time. And, that ended up really well, because it gave us 9/11 and a 20-year war that just ended. So
yeah, which is also, by the way, not a like. There is a scenario that some people have raised that would be disturbingly parallel here, right? Like, in a couple ways, right? First, even before all this happened, like Ukraine was already a huge center of black market for weapons, and then there are just all these new weapons flooded in there. Like that's worried in itself, right? Like
we're empowering warlords right now, basically.
And then, like, the other is that, I mean, I know this is touchy and it's complicated because there is, like, genuinely a Putinist narrative about this that's ridiculous and not true. But, like, it is also, like, there actually are far-right militias in Ukraine that are incorporated into the Ukrainian military. Doesn't mean the country is run by Nazis or that, Putin's...
Well, we have that, too, over here.
Not denazification is anything but like transparently ridiculous bullshit or anything like that. But, there really are some Nazis. And the idea that, like heavy weaponry could end up in the hands of far-right people who, might not go back to entirely peaceful and on the up and up lives after this particular war is over. I mean, like, I think that should be, people got mad at Ilhan Omar when she brought that up, when she was like, hey, before we vote for, before we vote for all these arms shipments, can we have some sort of guarantee that none of this, that none of it is going to end up in these people's hands. And she's like, oh, Ilhan Omar loves Putin. She's promoting Putin propaganda. It's like, no, I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, I've been teaching this class on Capital, and so I have all these phrases that Marx uses in Capital in my head right now. And there's this one surprisingly funny passage in the chapter on money when he talks about a weaver who takes the linen he's weaving to market, and then he uses it to buy a Bible, and like Marx's expression, which is just for some reason being of the school. He spends it on the Bible. And it's so I don't know. I mean, I as a man of the old school, I kind of think that like maybe maybe Nazis getting heavy weapons is something that that you should strive to avoid, if at all possible. And maybe in this case you say, well, it's just the trade-off is such that it's just worth it, or we just can't afford to worry about it. But at the very least, I'd like to have that be part of the discussion. But it just seems to me that what the Chomsky thing really shows is that we've just somehow managed to revert to what, like, it's like fall of 2001, but with social media this time, right? That like, if you aren't exactly as hyped up about all the things you're supposed to be hyped up about, you have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the Patreon-exclusive post-games on Monday nights, all of the Patreon-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.